Welcome to The Explainer. I come to you today as a lone traveler, having just returned from the very edge of the wilderness, and I want to invite you to join me on a dark, alchemical journey of the soul. We're going to dive deep into a grim fable about the human psyche. It's a story of how we completely lost our way, and more importantly, how we might actually find it again. So settle in and grab your focus, because we're going to walk through the shadows together to understand exactly where heroes perish and how they're reborn.
So, picture this. Our story begins in a cold, gray city made entirely of stone and steel. We were the master builders, right? We achieved what we thought was the absolute pinnacle of human existence, a life of effortless efficiency. But here's the catch. To build this frictionless metropolis, we systematically dismantled the old, crumbling temples that used to hold the stories of our ancestors. Physically, we were secure, absolutely. But in this gaping abyss of human suffering, our symbolic compass was totally lost. Without those external sacred structures, this strange, heavy malaise just kind of seeped into the streets. We were perfectly safe, yet we were entirely deeply spiritually famished.
And this created an agonizing split that we really forced upon ourselves. We built the machine world. It was basically a psychic vacuum where we literally hollowed out our own hearts just to make room for gears, steel, and these magnificent machines. But in exchange, we suppressed what we called the hidden wisdom. The great reason, that mighty ruler and unknown sage that literally resides in our blood. We traded the raw, chaotic wisdom of our own nature for this cold, mechanical perfection. And in doing so, we just began drifting through a gray world of our own making.
Now, to survive the unbearable pressure of this psychic vacuum, we went through a really painful fragmentation of the self. We forged golden masks. But look, these weren't beautiful adornments. They were heavy chains. They were highly polished social personas crafted for one specific reason: to hide the ugliest man. That's the dark, shameful shadow self residing deep inside every single one of us. And psychologically speaking, avoiding the shadow doesn't just make it magically disappear. Actually, it just makes it control you from the unconscious. So these masks acted as a regressive defense mechanism, totally paralyzing us and preventing any real psychological growth.
As you can imagine, this kind of psychological decay doesn't just happen overnight. It's a progression. First came the spiritual famishment, as our temples fell and meaning just vanished. Then that resulting psychic vacuum forced the fragmentation of self. To cope with that, we moved to the third epoch, forging those golden masks to hide our massive internal emptiness. But you can't suppress human nature forever, right? The internal pressure became way too much, birthing this desperate need to merge with a collective shadow. And that inevitably dragged us into the darkest epoch of all, tribalistic aggression.
Because we had completely lost our internal compass, we desperately sought out a hollow belonging. We basically replaced the incredibly difficult labor of individual, personal growth with the really easy comfort of false idols. We rallied behind political banners, we screamed empty slogans in the streets. We truly thought we were finding community, but honestly, we were really just avoiding the hard work of looking in the mirror.
We marched in those streets demanding justice. We held up this mirror of justice to judge our neighbors fiercely. But psychology tells us a fascinating, kind of terrifying truth. What we hate most in others is often exactly what we fear in ourselves. The whole thing was a lie. Our tribalistic aggression and all our loud moral outrage were really just masks for our own deep-seated resentment and a quiet desire for legal revenge. We were so completely terrified of our own emptiness that we aggressively attacked the emptiness we saw in everybody else.
We became, in the end, bridges that broke. We tried to connect. We really tried to build, but we relied entirely on communal scaffolding and what we call poor reason. We were completely unable to reconcile our rational, mechanical minds with the chaotic, raw desires of our actual nature. So despite our absolute technological perfection, despite all that effortless efficiency, we remained completely broken and totally hollowed out from the inside.
All right, let's move into our next section, the descent into the wilderness, specifically the realm of the dragon.
Speaking as the traveler, I could no longer stand the malaise haunting my perfect house in that city of stone. I was so weary of the masks, the empty slogans, the whole shebang. So I walked away. I wandered alone into the dark, uncharted territory known as the Seventh Solitude. Now, I expected a physical beast when I met the dragon out there. I expected to be burned alive, for sure. But instead, the beast cast a terrifying spell over me. It forced a profound psychological awakening. Let me be clear, this was no glorious hero's battle. This was a brutal descent into the dark night of the soul. The dragon spirit stripped away every single one of my defenses and forced me to look at exactly what I had become. That dragon spirit acted as an agonizing alchemical catalyst, driving me through 3 brutal steps. First, it completely shattered my golden mask, leaving me totally exposed and raw. Second, it forced me to stand absolutely still and actually invite the ugliest man, my deepest shame, my shadow, inside, so I could finally find some wholeness. And third, it taught me that the poison of my hidden darkness could not be defeated by projecting it onto my neighbors. It had to be integrated. I literally had to use my own darkness as the fuel for my personal transformation.
And this brings us right to the climax of the journey. Out there, completely alone in the 7th solitude, the transformation finally occurred. I ceased being a breaker of tablets. I stopped trying to tear down the world around me. I surrendered entirely. I became my own internal judge. I didn't need the city's mirror of justice anymore, because in a moment of absolute vulnerability, I was finally weighing my own soul. It was then that I proclaimed a holy yeah, a triumphant, heroic affirmation. I finally said yes to the consequences of my own nature. I stopped running from the beautiful chaos within my own blood. I embraced the great reason that the city had tried so desperately to silence for all those years. This holy yeah is absolutely crucial. It's the exact moment the hollow shell cracks wide open and the true self finally takes its first breath.
This is what it truly means to survive the wilderness, because a survivor returns to the village not as a hollow shell anymore, but as an architect of meaning. An architect is a unified whole subject. They don't waste their time trying to rebuild the old crumbling stone temples of the past. No way. Instead, they stand firmly in the face of the void. They stare directly into the psychic vacuum, and they courageously author their own story. This, right here, is how the age of the hero actually begins.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to carry with you long after this explainer ends. That city of stone, it still stands. The psychic vacuum is still out there, calling. So what are you going to do? Will you continue to wear the heavy chains of the golden mask, hiding your shadow in some kind of hollow belonging? Or will you walk into the 7th solitude, face your dragon, and author your own story in the void? The choice, traveler, is entirely yours.